Great. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Human Trafficking Awareness webinar during National Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month, hosted by the Iowa Secretary of State's office and Chains Interrupted. My name is Ashley, and I'm the Business Services Outreach Specialist here at our office. I'm joined by Secretary Pate, Teresa Davidson from Chains Interrupted, Christy and Sydney, who work in the Safe at Home and IBAT programs, and then Jacob, who works in the Communications Division. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded for future use and your name and details are hidden from other participants. We will have a moderated question and answer session at the end of the webinar today, so feel free to post your questions in the Q&A chat box. Just make sure it's the Q&A specific chat box, and we will do our best to answer as many of those questions as possible. And with that, I'm happy to welcome our presenter for today, Teresa Davidson of Chains Interrupted. Teresa Davidson is a pediatric nurse practitioner that fights against human trafficking as Iowa's first anti-human trafficking coordinator in a hospital and co-founder of Chains Interrupted, a nonprofit dedicated to fight human trafficking in Eastern Iowa and beyond. Teresa's passion to fight human trafficking began on a mission trip to Africa where she saw children being victimized by this crime. She has since led and served on multiple mission trips to fight human trafficking, including to Guatemala, India, Nepal, Burma, and Thailand. Teresa has received 2 Governor's Service Awards for her work in anti-human trafficking, Iowa's 100 Great Nurses Award. In October 2019, President Trump appointed her to serve on the Federal Public-Private Partnership Advisory Council to End Human Trafficking, a group of just 11 leaders from around the nation. She is honored to partner with Iowa's Secretary of State in raising awareness and prompting action against this heinous crime. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you. I truly am honored to be here, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to get started because I have a lot of information to share with you. Are you able to see it?
Yes, we can.
All right. So the title of this is Breaking the Chains of Human Trafficking. I am the co-founder and CEO of Chains Interrupted, which is a nonprofit that is in Eastern Iowa, but we fight human trafficking all over the place. And on this main slide, you can see that there's a photo of the movie Taken. And a lot of times people think that this is very similar to something out of a Hollywood movie like Secretary Pate often mentions. And one of those movies is the movie Taken. A young girl is kidnapped, forced, tied up, locked away in a basement, would absolutely try to get away if she was able to. And if we only think of human trafficking in this light, now this is one way that it can happen indeed, but if we only think of it in that light and not as in the second picture, which is chains of the mind, psychological manipulation and all that, we're going to miss 99% of this. And so it's really important that today we kind of break down those stereotypes and really dive into what this actually looks like, especially in Iowa. So I have a question for you before we get started, and there's going to be a poll here that Ashley will launch. And the question is, have you ever encountered someone victimized by human trafficking in your workplace or personal life? And I'll give you a few seconds to answer that. Looks like quite a few of you actually have seen someone that was potentially victimized, at least. Okay, looks like everyone has answered, and it's interesting that so many people have actually seen someone or think that they've seen someone, because I feel like that's because the word is getting out and we're recognizing it more. So that makes me very, very happy. I'm gonna see if I can do this. And all right, I'm not able to advance my slides, Ashley.
Okay, let me see.
There we go.
Okay, perfect.
Now the poll is still up for me. Is it up for everyone? There we go. All right, we're going to talk about what actually is human trafficking. So there's the AMP model, which talks about the action, the means, and the purpose. So the action is inducing, recruiting, harboring, transporting, providing, or obtaining someone by means of force, fraud, or coercion. And human trafficking encompasses a lot of different things. When I was overseas, I saw organ trafficking, infant trafficking, child soldiers, child brides. But for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to talk about the two most common purposes in the United States, which is commercial sex trafficking or labor services. And on the next slides, we're going to go back and unpack that force, fraud, or coercion. So let's talk about force. And this is the way people mostly think about human trafficking. Someone is physically forced through kidnapping, maybe held at gunpoint, knife point, they're drugged into submission, something that involves physical force. Fraud is lying, manipulating, tricking, and we often see this through a fake relationship, either a romantic partner, a friend, a family, the mother you always longed for, the father you never had, uncle, cousin, someone, they're claiming to be that family. They're making a new family. And then we also see this tricking with labor trafficking through those fake employment ads. Coercion makes human trafficking extremely complex and difficult to identify. And this is more of a psychological persuasion. You're going to force somebody to do something that they don't want to do through threats, intimidation, guilt, shame, loyalty. This photo on this slide is Biederman's chart of coercion, and it was actually created in 1957 to describe torture tactics on prisoners of war. And it now actually can translate to tactics traffickers use to groom people into trafficking. So labor trafficking, some examples of that would be domestic work like maids, child care, adult caregiving, etc., agriculture, factories. We see labor trafficking in restaurants, in the hospitality industry with hotels and motels, construction works. The Polaris Project in 2017 released a report called The Typology of Modern Slavery, which classified 25 distinct types of trafficking business models occurring in the United States. 6 of those under labor trafficking are listed here, and every single type of the 19 labor trafficking business models in the report also had a sex trafficking component, meaning that some of those that are exploited by labor trafficking have to provide both labor and sex acts. So what is the law if a person is victimized by human trafficking under 18? So we all know that a sex act with a minor is abuse, but a sex act with a minor that includes payment, so a commercial sex exchange, is automatically considered human trafficking by Iowa and federal law. And a payment doesn't have to be money. It can be, but it can also be of anything of value: food, clothing, shelter, drugs. Think about a runaway child who is having to survive on the streets, and they may provide sex acts in order to have survival. That is automatically considered human trafficking by Iowa Code 710A and 232.70, which is our mandatory reporting guidelines. So human trafficking with a child, so commercial sex exchange, is automatically a mandatory reporter, if any of you are on this call that are mandatory reporters. Now, as we go through this presentation, there's going to be a lot to remember, and there is also so much more to learn than I can provide in this 40-minute presentation. And so I want to make sure that you remember at least 5 main points in this presentation. And this is the first one. There is no such thing as a child prostitute. Again, there is no such thing as a child prostitute. If someone is under 18, or a child, and they are providing a commercial sex exchange, which we sometimes consider prostitution, that is automatically human trafficking, so they are a victim. In 2016, the National Survivor Network did a survey of 130 survivors, and this just showed how frequently children are exploited by human trafficking. 52.3% were first trafficked as children in the survey. Age 14 to 15 was the highest percentage. And sadly, which breaks my heart, 4.5% were trafficked before the age of 10. So let's talk a little bit about how it happens, because in order to understand what to look for, human trafficking is so complicated and so diverse that I could never list all the signs and symptoms. And so it's really important to understand the process in order to understand what you're seeing sometimes. So there are 6 stages of grooming, and the first one is that traffickers tend to target someone. Now, we are all capable of being a target because we all have something or someone that we care about. However, traffickers do target certain people and certain vulnerabilities more often, and those are listed here. Some emotional neediness, maybe someone has low self-esteem, they don't have a friend group, they don't feel like they fit in, maybe they're being bullied. A huge vulnerability is a history of sexual abuse or sexual assault for both victims and traffickers. Those who are young, of course, wanting love, affection, looking for adventure, and then those people online. And we're going to talk a little bit more about online and how prevalent that is in a little bit. So they'll target the vulnerability, and then their goal is to gain trust. Now, how many of you think that you could recognize a trafficker if you saw one? Because you likely have a picture of what a trafficker looks like in your mind. But a survivor friend of mine tells me all the time, every one of us fits the profile of a victim, we fit the profile of a trafficker, and we fit the profile of a buyer. Now, this is the second main point of this presentation to remember. Everyone fits the profile of a trafficker, buyer, and victim. So we have to take the stereotypes that we have in our mind out. Otherwise, we're going to miss this because, you know, the traffickers in these photos look like people that we see every day. And what they're doing is working to gain that potential victim's trust because they want to find out what they need. And when they find out what they need, they're going to fill that need. Maybe it's a place to stay. Maybe it's wealth or luxury items. Maybe it's drugs and alcohol. A lot of times it's a relationship. And again, can be a romantic partner, family situation, friend relationship, affection, attention, fame, safety, protection. The goal is for the trafficker is to become that person's savior, the only one who gets them, the only one who understands them, the only one who can provide for them. Once they create that dependency, they will isolate the person. Maybe they actually move them across state lines or away from friends and family who could potentially help them, or at least kind of talk to them about what's going on. But most of the time, they're just going to isolate them socially. They'll break down all of the good relationships that that person has in their life, replacing them with themselves. And once they have that, that is when the abuse begins. Once they're the only people in their life. And it can be physical abuse, it can be financial abuse, emotional, spiritual, all of the things I've seen many times. And you see this picture on the top left where they're just embracing. And that happens with the cycle of abuse. When the reconciliation comes, the person who's been abused is so grateful that they just are back in a honeymoon phase. And that is one of the ways that traffickers maintain control. They also, through threats and the violence, but also fear, blackmail. And again, you can see in this photo, traffickers aren't always male. Sometimes they're women. Victims can be all genders. This crosses all gender, race, age, socioeconomic status, all these barriers, it crosses them. And so we cannot stereotype. Where does it happen? It happens a lot of places. Unfortunately, schools are ripe for trafficking. Sadly, the demand is very high for the young people. Traffickers have been known to pay children in schools to tell them which kiddos are vulnerable, which children have a dysfunctional family unit, are bullied, don't have friend groups, are home alone after school, whose parents may be using substances. In the college scene, Western Iowa Tech Community College in Sioux City is currently being sued in federal court for labor trafficking. A group of students from Chile are doing that. Residential treatment, youth shelters, PMICs, et cetera, that's where the vulnerable children are, and traffickers know that, so they will target there. Community centers like youth centers, libraries, a lot of people that are experiencing homelessness gather there. And again, they're very vulnerable to trafficking, grooming. Businesses, and of course we've got the Iowa Businesses Against Trafficking through the Secretary of State. You know, Chains Interrupted has worked with people who have been trafficked for labor and or sex in various businesses. One example is a young gal who is in the United States without documentation, and she found a restaurant who would provide her cash to wash dishes. But the restaurant owner and her landlord were friends. So one day the restaurant owner stopped paying her to wash the dishes, and the landlord told her that she would have to pay him with sexual services. So she couldn't report this to the police because she had fear of deportation, and she couldn't move away because she didn't have any money. You know, transportation centers are the places where kids go when they run away, and also having to rely on public transportation is a vulnerability in itself. Parks, playgrounds, public events, you know, sadly, this includes our state fair, John Deere Classic, races, rodeos, carnivals, and more. Basically, wherever there is people and disposable income, you have trafficking. Online, this is a big one, and it's probably the number one way, the number one place that traffickers are grooming people into trafficking situation. Social media sites, dating websites, sugar dating sites, porn sites, chat rooms. 89% of survivors say that they were groomed and manipulated in a chat room online. Sexting, sharing those explicit photos or videos over texts. And we can't forget gaming devices. It might surprise you that gaming devices are a very popular choice by traffickers, where they're going to groom children into trafficking. If it has internet capability, it has as much risk as a computer or a tablet. So point 3 to remember out of the 5 points, is that children in your life are being targeted online. It's really not a question of if or when. If they are online, they are being targeted. One important way to prevent human trafficking is to teach our children online safety and to monitor their online interactions. Children are not developmentally ready to handle what will be thrown at them online. You can be anybody you want to be online. Meet 10-year-old Becky's 12-year-old internet friend. And why does 10-year-old Becky believe that this is a 12-year-old girl who loves volleyball and puppies? Because she's 10. And children do not have the developmental capability to handle what will be thrown at them online. And there are hundreds and thousands of predators online every second, just trolling, looking for our children to post something that makes them vulnerable. And they all are posting stuff too much. And we need to teach them online safety a lot. We need to focus on this a lot more than we are. A question I get all the time: does it happen in Iowa? Well, I will let the media speak for itself here. And as you can see, this crosses all races, ages, genders, etc. I will mention that these are people who were arrested and not all were convicted. It's actually very difficult to get a conviction on someone with a charge of human trafficking. And these are just some over the last few years, and there's many more. A lot of people are charged with other things than human trafficking. And just a week ago, Jacob Kerr was arrested for allegedly selling his girlfriend for sexual services. He rented a West Des Moines hotel room for about a month, and the police investigation started after a tip from a hotel employee. So I don't know who that person is, but if you are listening, I want to tell you that you are a hero. You not only made an incredible difference in that young lady's life, but you may literally have saved her life. You inspire me to keep going in a fight that can seem very daunting and overwhelming. So thank you. Through Mercy Medical Center, Chains Interrupted, a lot of other agencies in Iowa that I work with, there's been multiple referrals, and I just want to kind of focus here on some businesses. So one of the referrals that we got in Iowa, it was a nursing school, a student attending a nursing school in Iowa while she was being trafficked. Another one was a hospital staff member who was working at a hospital in Iowa when she was groomed and then trafficked. I had an adult male, strong and muscular, referred to me, and it was hard to believe that anyone could control him, but his family had been trafficking him since he was a little boy. So one, he didn't know any different, and two, in order to get out, he had to leave his entire family. I had a referral from a woman who escaped out of the back of a semi full of other victims at a truck stop. So if you work at a truck stop, you can be watching for stuff like this. A survivor who worked at a local grocery store the whole time she was being trafficked. There was a woman who was trafficked by her husband, who was a successful, charismatic businessman in their small town, and so nobody relieved her. And also a survivor reported that their trafficker was a woman who worked at a hotel and used her status there to rent rooms and traffic people. And there are so many other examples, but these are just some. So crud, now what do we do? I mean, this is the bad news, right? Well, the good news is that there are things that we can do. And the 2 steps are to identify and respond. Identification can be tough. Day 11, the humans still don't know I adopted a cat. And isn't this just like human trafficking? Hidden in plain sight. You really do need to look a little deeper, and you might indeed find human trafficking in situations where you might not have otherwise. So potential signs of trafficking, and please remember that these are not all of them. And if there's one sign present, it doesn't necessarily mean a trafficking situation, but traffickers can look very controlling. They'll be monitoring other people. Maybe they're living a lavish lifestyle that doesn't line up with the business that they're in. So they have far more money than the regular business would give to them. Making purchases for trafficking business, this would be including things like lingerie, condoms, lubricant, personal hygiene products, prepaid debit cards, throwaway mobile phones, ads online, hotel rooms, or for items that sustain a large group of people, like lodging, routine vehicle rentals, large amounts of food and hygiene products. And they also may send those that they're victimizing to purchase these items as well. So anybody that's working retail and sees these purchases can take note and look a little deeper. Also watch for individuals trying to launder money, like using multiple aliases, addresses, bank accounts, credit cards over the same address or phone number to open multiple accounts with different names. Maybe they are insisting on being listed as a guardian or authorized user on an account. A survivor once told me that he was never linked to or involved with the bank accounts. He would just sit at the bank with me and make sure I wasn't telling anyone anything. For banks, you can look for strings of late night deposits into multiple ATMs or structured deposits at multiple branch locations. And they're always going to try to keep below that $3,000 and $10,000 reporting requirements. You know, many survivors state that their trafficker would loiter nearby to keep tabs on them while they purchased items or received a service, but they also state that their trafficker would send them to loiter in certain public areas of businesses in order to pick up customers. Labor traffickers will charge people who work for them unreasonable things and then deduct this from their pay. And so you could also see payroll deductions. As far as people that are victimized by this, you may see someone that has either disheveled or expensive clothes, suddenly having luxury items, suddenly having money or cash they didn't have before. Maybe they wear inappropriate clothing for the situation or the weather. Signs of physical abuse, malnourishment, medical and dental neglect, sleep deprivation, tattoos or brandings. There's all kinds of tattoos that are associated with trafficking, including barcodes, dollar signs, but a lot of times what I see are names written on people. And a lot of times, as in this photo here, it almost looks homemade done, like home done and not professionally done. Signs of gang association, but really a big one is that they appear to be under the control of someone else. And then those behaviors are going to be as if they are being controlled by someone else. Be scared, fearful, anxious, depressed, acting like their communication is monitored and that people can hear them through their cell phone. No eye contact with you. They don't want to talk about it, those kind of things. Significant behavioral issues would be changes in behavior, aggressive towards adults and authority, frequently running away. I knew a survivor that was purposefully becoming institutionalized so that she would not have to be involved in the trafficking experience on the streets. Stories can be inconsistent, but they also can be wild. And that kind of leads to a lot of people not believing them. But if you've got a wild story being told, you really do need to look into it, because these stories can be very true. The person may not know where they are, what day it is, language that is common in trafficking, family, daddy, wifey, sister-in-law, trick, track, kiddie stroll, all of these. If you start hearing those kind of terms come up, that is very common language in trafficking. If you hear somebody talking about having to do unusual household chores, or maybe they have unusually long hours at work, or they have high security measures at their workplace, like bars on the window or locks on the door, or that they owe a debt that they're unable to pay, these are all potential signs of human trafficking. I would say that the greatest challenge in identification is recognize these people as being victimized. We really do think that we know based on the limited picture of what we see, and we tend to judge, but it's really not likely the total picture. And this is point 4 to remember during this presentation, that force, fraud, or coercion may not always be apparent or visible. Victims look like anyone else. You have to dig a little deeper. There's a lot of barriers to disclosure. People that are victimized by human trafficking do not come up and say, hey, help me, I'm being victimized by this. Many times they don't. They can, but many times they don't understand that they're being victimized. They don't understand they're in an unhealthy relationship. They may have threats and intimidation being perpetrated on them by the trafficker. Maybe they committed some crimes during their trafficking experience, and so they're afraid to go to the police, or they fear deportation. There's a lot of feelings of being morally obligated or even legally obligated to serve the trafficker. And I already talked about that familial trafficking, where there's that obligation, self-blame, guilt and shame, a lot of coercion with that, feeling dependent on the trafficker for survival, feeling judged. And sometimes they can't disclose because we don't separate them from the accompanying person, or we don't address the cell phone that they think that the trafficker can be listening on. So what are we looking at here? Before I go on that, I want to do another poll. Now that you have heard these signs and symptoms of human trafficking, do you feel differently? Have you ever encountered someone victimized by human trafficking in your workplace or personal life? We'll take a second to answer that. Okay, that is incredible that more people have seen someone that they think has been victimized by human trafficking in your workplace or personal life than hasn't. A lot of people are unsure, but very interesting. Okay, I'm going to stop that. Go here. Okay. So there's the Iowa Businesses Against Trafficking program, and I'm just so excited that this exists. One of the things that we're doing with the Iowa Business Against Trafficking is trying to educate people on, especially in businesses, because honestly, businesses are the key. We see so much trafficking occurring within businesses, not necessarily the business is trafficking, but people that are employed are actually being trafficked. The business could be involved, but also supply chains and all the things. So with general signs, this is with all businesses, be on the lookout for employees who seem to be under the control of someone else. Maybe they're handing off a lot of their paycheck to someone. Someone else applied for the job for them, or they talk of several other jobs and are so tired, but basically all the signs of victimization that we've already gone through. And then I kind of label businesses, break them down into a couple groups. One is businesses that customers enter, such as retail stores, restaurants, nail salons, etc. Watch for customers with all of the signs of human trafficking, but plus anybody loitering, making transactions, which is actually how I first discovered human trafficking existed, because a trafficker was coming to the medical clinic that I'd set up in Africa and making transactions for human trafficking at my clinic. And so watch for that. And then, of course, it depends on the type of business. So one retail company that was located across the street from an illicit massage business noticed employees that were coming into the business and picking out what they wanted to buy, but they didn't have any money. So someone else was coming in and paying for the items for them. Another retail business noticed that certain girls were coming in to buy bulk condoms, lube, makeup, lingerie, pregnancy tests. So they noticed something off. The Eastern Iowa Regional Airport noticed a young girl with very little luggage and not a lot of knowledge about where she was traveling to, and someone else had purchased the plane ticket, and they prevented her from traveling into an almost certain life of exploitation. Then there's businesses that have employees that go out into the community, like EMS workers, realtors, construction workers, repairmen, waste collectors, all of that. And you have a very unique opportunity to be watching for signs at the locations where the trafficking may be occurring. I know a realtor who saw locks on the outside of a bedroom door in a house. I know a waste collector who noticed bars on the windows and cameras around the outside of a house. And I know of an EMS worker who noticed a scared looking child who didn't seem to belong in the corner of another room. Now, financial institutions are businesses that customers enter, but quite frankly, you deserve special mention, because while most businesses and organizations can identify and assist those victimized, you have such a unique and incredible opportunity to capture the traffickers. In fact, you actually have a risk of being criminally charged with failure to guard against the corruption of our financial system by traffickers. So your BSA specialists are going to be your friends in this and monitor. And I know several BSA specialists who have uncovered trafficking rings. One trafficker stated to the Polaris Project, we had businesses, we had fake businesses, we had doing businesses as, we had businesses that were subsidiaries of other businesses. The businesses would each have bank accounts, the subsidiaries would each have bank accounts. I mean, it's very complicated. And so we need all these businesses to be on the lookout for stuff like this. So what do you do? What do you do if you see a potential trafficking situation? I feel like there's two main kinds of trafficking situations. There's the emergency situation in which imminent danger is present. A victim comes up and requests help. You need to report a tip or a minor is involved. In all of those situations, call law enforcement. Don't try to approach someone. Don't try to rescue someone. Collect as much information as possible, as much as it is possible, and act as if everything is normal and routine while you're doing so. Chains Interrupted highly recommends that you have a relationship with law enforcement prior to needing them. If you're a business, establish that relationship up front, because calling 911 will be second best to calling someone that you already have a relationship with and know what the protocols are and have a plan. In a non-emergency situation where you're suspecting something, maybe Your child has a friend that suddenly has luxury items and talks about dates with older men, and you're worried that this could be trafficking. You can call the hotlines, and I'll give you those numbers here on the next page. But I would very highly encourage you to trust your gut. And that is point 5 of this presentation to remember. Trust your gut and report. We would much rather that people report things that actually weren't a human trafficking situation than not report and have somebody continue to live in a life of exploitation. So here are some places that can give you help. Chains Interrupted is one of them, but also Iowa has an office to combat human trafficking. There is a national human trafficking hotline number listed here, but we also are blessed because we have an Iowa Victim Service Hotline, and the Iowa Service Hotline will know a little bit more about what the resources are in Iowa should you need any kind of resources for people. But all of these places can help you understand if this truly is a human trafficking situation, walk you through it, guide you, give you advice. So while you're working with somebody that you suspect is being trafficked, understand that most of those people that are exploited by trafficking will not choose to leave their situation the first time they're identified. Don't give up, keep working with it. There's a lot of barriers in which they have to leave that life. It's absolutely critical for your safety and the safety of the person that you're trying to help to maintain an appearance of normal and routine. Do not let a trafficker know that you're onto them. So try to get all the information that you can about appearance, license number, the number of people involved, etc., acting as if everything's normal and routine. If you're going to ask somebody any questions, or you need to get them alone prior to asking any questions at all. Remember, you cannot tell who a trafficker is. They look like me, they look like you, they look like all of us. And so you really do need to not trust anyone, even if the person that you're talking to says you can trust them, because they're supposed to say that. You really do need to address a cell phone issue and put it in airplane mode so that the person feels like they can talk freely to you. And if there is a language barrier, do not use the person that is with them. If you need to, use only professional interpreters for this. So this is the website for the Iowa Businesses Against Trafficking organization. And basically businesses can join this, and your commitment is to learn something and do something. Today, you've learned something. I hope you have anyway, but there's a lot more opportunities out there to learn more, and then also do something. And then those two things equal making a difference. So to learn more, there is another webinar coming up. There, you would also have the opportunity to attend it live. It will be at Mercy Medical Center on January 24th from 9 to noon. This is an incredible opportunity. It's called Barriers Faced by Sex Trafficking Survivors. There will be multiple survivors there talking about the barriers that they faced getting out of the life and the barriers that they face now trying to restore their lives. This is something that's not often talked about, and I'm really excited. It will also be live streamed, and you can register at mercycare.org here at this site. We are partnering with the National Center on Sexual Exploitation to bring you this incredible symposium. Of course, you can learn more on the IBAT website, and to tell you, 3 videos are being created for the IBAT program with more details on the businesses customers enter, more signs and symptoms and what to do, more information on businesses in which employees go into the community, and also financial institutions. So learn something and do something. Do something personally. Tell at least 5 people what you've learned today, or that they should learn something about human trafficking. Please be aware within your own circle, which means look in your family, in your church group, in your neighbors, in your children's schools. Look for the people that are vulnerable, because as you learned today, the traffickers are going to target them. And so if we can get to them first and provide the things that the traffickers would have tried to provide for them, we can make a huge step in preventing this from happening. So be aware and then take action within your own circle. And then please join the fight for freedom. There are many organizations in our state. Chains Interrupted is just one of them, but we would welcome you volunteering, giving, donating your time, your talent, your skills to the fight for freedom. But there are many others in your area as well. If you're a business, please create a policy for what your employees should do should they see something that they're concerned about. Train your team on this, spread the word, use your business to spread the word on social media or in whatever you can. Please check your supply chain to make sure that labor trafficking is not happening there. And then I would encourage you to give what you do. Are you a business that is in the business of signs or billboards or something like that? Then help us advertise this, help us spread the word. If you're a financial institution, help us stop this, help us get the traffickers, but also help the survivors with restoration. There's so many times that their credit's been destroyed and they come out of a trafficking situation with such high debt that they can't even get accounts. So think about what your business does. There's lots of examples on what businesses do to help this based on what they do. Again, the 5 main takeaways. 1, there's no such thing as a child prostitute. 2, everyone watching this presentation fits the profile of a victim, a trafficker, and a buyer. 3, the children in your life are being targeted online. 4, force, fraud, and coercion are not always obvious. And 5, please trust your gut. So I'm going to end my presentation by telling you a quote from one of my favorite abolitionists, William Wilberforce. You may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say that you did not know. Here is my contact information at Chains Interrupted, the email, the website, the phone number there. And I'll leave it up there for just a second, but I believe now I'm going to turn this over to Secretary Pate.
Oops. Thank you again, Teresa, and Chains Interrupted. As mentioned early on, we do have a very exciting organization, Iowa Businesses Against Trafficking. And I just want to give credit again to how this got started. It was a combination of efforts. We had started a program called Safe at Home 7 years ago, in which we wanted to help people who were victims of domestic violence or sexual abuse, assault, stalking, and trafficking by giving them an address confidentiality program so that they could be safe in their own homes. And through that program, we have now reached well over 1,200 participants in 78 counties. The message there is these kinds of crimes are not just limited to urban counties. These are in all 99 counties, urban and rural alike. And it's something that we all need to be more aware of and help when we can. And the success of that program helped move us into the human trafficking side. A lot of it was because of a presentation like this one that Teresa was doing when I was in Cedar Rapids attending a presentation they had hosted. And it shed a lot of light on something that's going on right in our own communities, as was pointed out. And the 5 points I will underscore again. It was excellently presented. Please take those to heart. That's what we do in IBAT. We ask businesses to learn more and then to do something. And they can do many things, as was pointed out. But the bare minimum is for them to make sure their employees know more about it so they can become messengers and to increase the size of our choir, if you will, and reaching out to their customers. This is another way we can assist in spreading the message. I think these are all positive steps. And for those who want to learn more, have specialists come in like Teresa. If they go to our website, there are groups like Chains Interrupted and others across the state that are more than happy to come in and then give them that one-on-one assistance in making sure it's out there. We've reached out to communities such as in Ankeny, we did their summer festival where we worked with them on making sure that their volunteers and people who came to the event were more aware of what human trafficking is about. Together, I think we can make a difference. I truly want to see where Iowa in the near future is truly human traffic free. It is a form of slavery. It's something that we can do something about. And together, I'm very confident we'll make progress in doing just that. Now, we did have some questions I noticed, Teresa, that were being submitted to us, and I'd invite any of you who do have other questions to please type those in right now, and we'll try and answer a few of those for you, and I'll put it back to you, Teresa, if you'd like. think I saw at least 3 or 4 in there that we'll try and answer, and those we can't, if you reach out to us, we'll make sure we get some kind of follow-up to you. So thank you again. I want to thank Ashley for putting this together, and all my staff, and Christy and our team. We take this very seriously as we reach out to businesses across Iowa and invite them to be a part of the Iowa Business Against Trafficking.
Well, thank you. And I did see a question in the Q&A that asked I mentioned that survey in which 4.5% of children were trafficked before the age of 10. And the question was that mainly by families? And I don't know for sure, but I think that before the age of 10, it is the majority is familial trafficking. And then there's also the kidnapping of young children. And a lot of times, sadly, that they are used in pornography. There's a huge demand for really young children in pornography these days, and that's part of it. Another question that I saw was, how do you help the victims of human trafficking? And I'll just kind of mention there's a lot of different help across the state. There's Wings of Refuge, Garden Gate Ranch, Freedom House, Lila Mae. There's a lot of different places that are actually restoration homes for people who've been victimized by human trafficking that they can go and stay and recover. At Chains Interrupted, we do have the Harbor Home, which allows that as well. And we have recently changed our focus to youth. And so we operate under 3 pillars, awareness, prevention, and advocacy. And with our awareness pillar, we just seek to raise awareness of all kinds of trafficking and what's happening and how to look for it and what to do. With prevention, we are seeking, it's so important to prevent this, because once someone has been trafficked, the life of trafficking is horrendous, and to recover from that takes a lot, and it's really a lifelong process. And so prevention is really key here. And so we seek to do that in a couple of ways, especially going into schools. We're talking to kids about the grooming process. We're also talking to the vulnerable children in our community, the more vulnerable children, like at Lynn County Juvenile Detention Center, our youth shelters, our PMICs, the mental health institution, et cetera. But for all of these children, we're not only talking to them about the grooming process and how this can happen so that they can prevent it, but also healthy relationships, how to tell if you're in a healthy relationship and what to do if you're not, what to do if someone's controlling you. And you feel like you have no options, because you do have options and there are people who care. However, not all adults are trustworthy, as we've learned today, and how to tell if an adult is trustworthy. So we're teaching the kids all of these things, and so we can hopefully prevent them from being trafficked. And then our advocacy piece, we're actually going in to help organizations that are already working with youth to equip them in identifying someone that's been trafficked or is being trafficked, or even has a high risk of being trafficked, to identify them with a screening tool, and then also provide services for them with this specific victimization. A lot of times they have multiple services that if we just added a little bit of something, it would address this particular type of victimization. And so we're advocating for them, providing advocacy through equipping other organizations, and then also through our Harbor Home and services for kiddos that have been trafficked. We fill in the gaps for a lot of different organizations. So I hope that answers kind of how we help people. One of the things that I didn't get a chance to mention in this presentation is trauma-informed care. And it's super important to understand how trauma affects the brain, and then how that affects behaviors, and then act accordingly. And so it's really, really important that people that are working with those who are victimized by human trafficking understand trauma-informed care and implement that. All right, I'm looking at the Q&A. Oh, somebody wants me to show the Mercy link again. So, oh, okay. Ashley's gonna answer that one. Maybe.
Oh, sorry. You can go ahead and share it again. I just clicked that so that we could keep track of which questions.
All right, let me go back here.
Thank you, Teresa.
Sure. While I'm doing this, do you see other questions I can answer or Secretary Pate can answer?
Teresa, you want to mention, does Change Interrupted have like a newsletter or some other forms of communication that those who want to know more about what you're doing and on this topic, they can access?
Yeah, we do. If they go to info@changeinterrupted.com and just ask for we do have a newsletter. We have a group of volunteers called the Chain Breakers that are vetted and really help us a lot with activities like speaking, booths, parades, raising awareness, the prevention piece, talking to kiddos. We also have regular volunteers that can do a lot of things, but there is a newsletter for just the general public and also the volunteers that we have lots of opportunities. And if they go to our website, we have all of our educational things listed, and they can sign up for the newsletter on the website too, changeinterrupted.com. Any other questions, Ashley?
Yep, we have a few really good questions in the chat. I'm gonna try to get to as many as possible. I'll just kind of go in order here. Is there a program in place specific for individuals diagnosed with disabilities or training that can be provided to individuals and staff in that arena?
That's a really good question. It's highly needed. I believe that every restoration facility in Iowa addresses some sort of disabilities, but there's not one that's really focused on that. And I would have to really look to see if there was one in the nation, but I would assume that there is, because so many people that have been afflicted by human trafficking do have disabilities, and the people that are advocating for them know that and are trying to address it. Good question.
Thank you, Teresa. And then are there any plans for emergency care in Iowa? They said, I know this is the largest gap, no emergency homes in Iowa. I believe I was told to helping people leave the life and get restoration.
Yes, and they're right. This is the biggest gap. This is the biggest need, and it's the hardest thing to address because of safety concerns and funding. And I mean, we've actually tried to start emergency home here in Cedar Rapids, and it's difficult with zoning laws and all of those kind of things. And so I do believe that there is an organization in Des Moines that is working very hard to get this up and running quite soon, and it will be available to our whole state through their organization. But for now, sadly, we are kind of stuck with helping people, but if they don't have housing, through hotels and domestic violence shelters and homeless shelters and stuff, and it's not optimal. We need to do better. We need to do more, because I mean, obviously hotels are a place where people are often exploited at, so it's very triggering for someone to have to go there for help.
If I could interject, it's a good point. When I served as mayor in Cedar Rapids, it was always a challenge trying to develop a program that the city governments can help with, as well as nonprofits. And even though in my formal position as Secretary of State, we don't fundraise or endorse organizations, I will say to you, these nonprofits need money. And they don't operate on just goodwill. We appreciate everyone's enthusiasm and volunteering, but without those funds, you can't have these homes you're talking about. And so one of the things you could do is spread that message, as well as you're reaching out and telling people to learn more about what we're doing here. And you can encourage your city councils and your county board of supervisors to assist in this endeavor. In the bigger areas, United Way is one of those entities too. You can work through. There are a lot of nonprofits who have worked in this arena, but it does come down to funding, because these individuals who've been trafficked, it isn't a quick 30-day in and out program. It takes in some cases years for these individuals to get up on their feet to where they have that independent stability and feel safe to resume a normal life. So it's an expensive rehab, to put it politely. So anything you can do on that front. In fact, I believe, don't you have a big event in April or March? I'm sorry, which is it?
Yeah, well, we have events all the time, but our gala is in April. Let me make sure I get the right date here. It's
Doesn't like being put on the spot.
yeah, I'm sorry, I should know. It's Saturday, April 15th.
Great. Well, again, I just want to underscore that because, and some of the challenges we faced on the homes, and then I'll get back to the other questions, is we'll get a home established and then word gets out where the home is.
Yeah.
And that defeats the purpose. We're trying to provide these people autonomy and safety. It's the same as we do with our Safe at Home program for address confidentiality. We tell these people we're helping you become independent by not letting the bad actor know where you're at. So it's an ongoing challenge. So that's my 2 cents on that topic.
Yes, thank you for saying that, because funding has prevented us from opening that emergency safe house. And so we're not giving up, but we had to pause. So are there any other questions in the chat, Ashley?
Yeah, there's a few more good ones. We're kind of running low on time, but we're gonna provide some more follow-up information to everyone that attended today and answer as many questions as possible after the fact as well. There is one about this person does not own a small business but live in a small town, like to ask local businesses about signing up to get on the Iowa Businesses Against Trafficking list. Do they contact Chains Interrupted or the state for that? You would go ahead and contact the state, our office, and you can go to our website, ibat.iowa.gov, and there's an application on there. And you can go ahead and share that website and the resources on there as well. So thank you for that. And then I think we have time for maybe like 1 or 2 more. There's one about sample policies or policy language somewhere that can be accessed. Looks like it's from the Department of Corrections, and are there handouts that we can download and print to display at businesses or in the restrooms? That's a good question.
I'm so glad that the Department of Corrections is on here. I actually created a presentation for the Department of Corrections because traffickers are targeting people in our prisons, because a lot of them don't have family or anybody that's reaching out to them. And so what they're doing is they suddenly find that there's money in their account for commissaries or whatever. They're suddenly getting letters there, and somebody's taking an interest in them. And so the person that's in prison is just, well, I'm going to accept that. Of course I'm going to accept that. It's free this and free that. And then what happens is that the traffickers are like, you owe me. Or they are in this fake relationship, this fake romantic relationship. And when they get out, they're the ones waiting for them when they get out. So it's very important that the Department of Corrections does have policies and is monitoring this. And yes, there's several things online, but if you want to reach out to me at info@chainsinterrupted.com, I will help you make a policy for this, because it's very important, because it's a big place where people are being targeted.
Thank you, Teresa. And we probably have time for one more here. There is something about homeless shelters. Many of the people that come in are from homeless shelters for the free lunch program in Iowa City. Are the homeless shelter volunteers or workers trained on what to look for as far as trafficking victims?
I can't speak to all of them, but in our area, we do go train whoever will have us come train them. And Willis Dady in Cedar Rapids and House of Hope, well, the Mission of Hope, excuse me. All of these have been trained, but there's also a high turnover of volunteers at these places. And so we, constantly need to be going in and doing the training. And so, yeah, it's just kind of not a one and done. We need to keep going in and going in and going in.
And since we're running out of time, I'm just going to say, we always welcome invitations to come into groups and enlighten them and present information. And that's what Teresa and her group do very well. And there are others who can do just that. And we appreciate your suggestions on people we ought to be seeing and talking to as we're going forward. I think that's so important. So again, the goal here is for people to learn something and to do something. I hope you took to heart the 5 points that Teresa has pointed out to everyone, because I think together we can make a difference in what we're doing. We hope to do more seminars like this in the future online and support putting on information that groups like Teresa's and others are doing, such as the one you're doing later this month. You put that information out there. Hope people will dial in for that one and again, spread the word. Thank you all for joining us today. Any last minute messages, Ashley?
There's some good feedback. People said it was a good presentation. And I also just wanted to say thank you to both Teresa and Secretary Pate again for your time. And thank you to everyone that joined us. We will send out the link to the webinar recording early next week, and then we'll follow up with those that still have questions. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.